Hey everybody, and welcome to another native plant garden tour. This one is going to be from July through August, and it's just about the beginning of July right now, and I thought I'd point out these gorgeous pale purple coneflowers that I have blooming right here. I actually just put some seeds in the ground in front of this boulder, just a little crack a few years ago, and finally getting some lovely flowers. So it just shows you don't need a ton of space to get some real native beautiful flowers growing. The Anise Hyssop is starting to bloom. It's very popular already with the bees. This is a very easy plant to grow from seeds, so if you're just getting into native gardening, I recommend picking up a little pack of these, and these actually bloom pretty quick from seed, sometimes the first year. This is a second year plant. Really great flower to add to your yard. My swamp milkweed is just about in full bloom here, and I have the regular pink variety, and I also have this lovely white variety as well. These were all grown from seed a few years ago. And they have this lovely sweet smell. To me, they kind of smell like a bubble gum or something. A very, very nice, sweet aroma to them. These didn't come back quite as strong as they were last year, so I think this fall and into winter, I think I'm finally gonna just try to grow some common milkweed as well and see if that comes back a little bit more reliably for me. But these ones in the front still look pretty darn good. So if you have some wet areas, they're a fairly good choice. But really, really nice scent on these flowers. This is purple prairie clover, and this has got to be one of my favorite purple colors in the garden. This one has a little crab spider on it right now, and the bumblebees really love this plant. This is a nitrogen fixing plant, so it's able to create its own fertilizer, which is super cool. I will let this guy be. But a very, very cool looking plant. So definitely one I recommend Early on, when I was just getting into native gardening, I went into a nursery that did have some native plants, so it wasn't like a big box store, and I asked, do you have any purple prairie clover? And the person working there had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. So if you like this plant, it might be one that you'll have to try and grow yourself. Maybe from seed or trying to order it online, but I think it's definitely worth the work for this one because it's a really special and unusual plant that very few people are going to have. So, keeping with a similar theme, over here I have white prairie clover. It's in the same family. The leaves are a little bit different on this one, but some nice variety. The bees love this one as well. And then just over to the left, I have some of my nodding onions that are just about ready to bloom. So we're gonna come back and check on those in just a couple days. But behind we have the long-headed coneflower is blooming over here. It's really fun watching the little native bees work these flowers. This lovely and unique flower is from the Buttonbush. This is actually a cultivar. This is the Sugar Shack. And as far as I know, the only real difference is this is more of a dwarf variety. And since I have this in the front, it won't get quite as big as the straight species, but it has the exact same lovely pom-pom blooms on it, and they're so unique. I don't have anything else that's even close to this in my yard. And Buttonbush, they love wet areas, so if you have a low wet spot, these could be a great fit. I've had this here for a few years, and this is the first year that it's blooming, so it's a little slow to establish, but I think it's worth it. The butterfly milkweed, the Asclepias tuberosa, is in full bloom right now. This is another unusual color in the garden, this vibrant orange. The camera doesn't even really do it justice here. It really pops. And this is a host plant for the monarch butterfly, but I feel like for host plants it's not quite as good just because the leaves are so much smaller. But this is still a lovely choice, and monarchs will use it, but like I said, it's perhaps not quite as good as some of the other milkweeds, that have those larger leaves. The wild bergamot is blooming right now. These are a favorite of bumblebees, and I've even seen hummingbirds visit these. This is a really great plant, and the leaves have a really nice aroma. It's in the mint family, so it's got those square stems. This is another plant that grows really great from seed. So definitely one to recommend if you're just getting into the hobby. And it provides a lot of great pollinator food, and it's just a cool plant to look at. This wonderful little flower is called Tennessee coneflower. And up until fairly recently, it was actually on the endangered plant list. So, pretty special plant to have growing. There's a little spider that just took off. And I have a few more blooms on the way, but this is just such a unique looking coneflower. It just doesn't quite look like the regular purple coneflower, so it's pretty special. I did plant another one of these by bare root in the spring, but the bunnies in the front have just really attacked it pretty hard, even though I've been spraying it with invisible fence. So this might be the solo Tennessee coneflower for now, but gosh, it's really pretty. The dense blazing star is starting to really bloom now. And this particular flower blooms from the top down. So there's quite a few more blooms on the way. And this is certainly very popular with the bees. And a lot of people walk by and they're very interested in what this plant is. And it's one of the easier ones to grow. A lot of the big box stores will even have bulbs in the fall. So definitely one that I recommend growing, and they're pretty hardy. They're fairly low maintenance, so they're a great pick and very showy. We just had a nice rain, and my great coneflowers are still standing strong on these long stalks that go down to that lovely bluish green foliage. And these blooms just kind of float above everything in the background. A really great flower, and then when the flowers are done, there's tons of seeds, and I've seen the goldfinches just really go after these, so it provides extra interest even after the flowers are done. I wanted to give a little update on another one of my great coneflowers. As you can see, this is how big that center cone gets. And there's just going to be just tons and tons of seeds in there for the birds. It really stands out and is a great accent in the garden. But yeah, this is how the flower heads mature a bit. It's really cool. So this is my New England Aster. It's already blooming here at the end of July, which is pretty crazy, and the bees have just been in heaven on this thing. This was planted by bare root just this spring, so it's wild that it's already this big and blooming, and there's still quite a few buds on the way, so this has definitely been a big hit and a nice color in my yard. This lovely plant is one of our native hibiscus. This is rose mallow. It has these big tropical looking flowers with the red center, and this is planted in a low area because it likes to keep its feet wet. And this is probably about 3.5, 4 feet tall right now, and the flowers only last about a day, but you can see there's tons more buds on the way. So this is a very showy native plant I definitely recommend. Here's another very interesting native shrub. This is shrubby St. John's wort, and as you can see, it has these really lovely yellow puff flowers that are really great bee magnets. And another great thing about this shrub is that it's definitely rabbit resistant. I've never had to worry about bunnies or other critters taking nibbles of this plant, so it's been fairly low maintenance for me, and it's also very adaptable. So I have it in a spot that can get pretty wet but also dries out, so definitely can handle a wide variety of soil conditions, which is awesome. I wanted to add in a quick clip of some of the gigantic sunflowers that I have growing. This whole thing is just one plant that's branching out and putting blooms all over the place. And it's got one of the biggest stalks I've ever seen. I mean, look at the size of this sunflower stalk. You could make a giant beanstalk mini movie on this thing. And some of the branches are so big they could be their own plant. It's just absolutely crazy, the size of this thing. The sweet Joe Pye weed is in bloom right now. And I actually realized it was blooming because it actually has a really great aroma as I was passing by. I've been waiting for this to open up for a few days now, and it's finally opened up and it smells terrific. And this little bumblebee sure is enjoying it. This is Maximilian sunflower, and I actually got these seeds and I opened them in my first video that I did. So these actually bloomed the first year from seed, which is pretty wild. It's probably about 3 feet tall right now. I'm sure it'll get bigger in future years, but it still has tons of buds on the way, so this is going to be a very prolific blooming native sunflower. These lovely flowers are Plains coreopsis, and these are an annual flower, and these have been successfully reseeding themselves in the same general area for a couple years now, so haven't even had to put down new seed or anything. They just seem to do okay in this area and come back every year. So if you're looking for a quick pop of color early on while you're establishing your perennials, this is a great choice. Alright, this is lanceleaf coreopsis, which has been blooming for a while now. I just kind of pop off the spent blooms and it just keeps putting out new flowers. And then over here we have the nodding onion, which is really starting to take off here. It's really fun watching the bumblebees hang upside down and go after these blooms. It's pretty cool. So it gets its name since the flower head kind of nods downward. And I think it also kind of helps it be protected from storms since the blooms are facing down. And then behind, the Prairie blazing star is starting to go off. These are getting pretty tall this year. They're just starting to bloom here. We'll check on those again as the obedient plant opens up behind them. But this is a blazing star that prefers more moist conditions. And then moving down, we have orange coneflower. And this has a ton of buds on the way, so this is going to be a pretty great spot of yellow color in this area, so that's pretty great. This cheery plant is called showy sunflower. I planted these by bare root just this spring, and these guys are about 6 feet tall right now. They're just gigantic. I'm standing up on a rock just to get to the flowers, but there's tons of them already blooming and tons more on the way. So definitely a great plant to have in the back of your border, since it will tower over all of the shorter perennials. This is meadow blazing star, and these are finally opening up. They're quite tall. These are over 4 or 5 feet tall right now. And these are really great for attracting monarch butterflies to your garden. So I have a little cluster here, and then a few more. Over here, opening up. Very showy plant. And quite a bit taller than the other dense blazing star that we looked at earlier. Definitely a great one to add. This is my Pearly Everlasting. It is currently just starting to bloom. This was planted from a 3-pack earlier this year, and I also have some that I started from seed this year that are blooming, so this is a pretty quick bloomer from seed, and it should spread over time. And this is a host plant for the painted lady butterfly, and it's got these soft leaves, and it's pretty interesting and different than the other things that I have blooming right now, so definitely worth checking out. This is common ironweed. This is another great deep purple color. I have it growing in not quite full sun, so it's probably not quite as tall as it would normally get, but still a great plant that attracts a lot of pollinators. This is obedient plant, and if you've ever heard about this plant before, you probably know that the petals will stay in the direction that you orient them. I always find myself playing with these when I'm walking by, and the bees love going into those blooms. It's definitely a pollinator magnet, and this is in the mint family, so it does spread quite a bit by roots and by seed, but the seeds tend to just fall around the plant, so you could weed them out or deadhead the blooms when they're done if you were trying to keep it in a smaller area, but definitely a great plant. I have the obedient plant growing with the Prairie blazing star. It's all looking really good. And then I wanted to call out the orange coneflower one more time, because this has just been a really great long blooming plant. A lot of native plants tend to bloom for just a short period, but this has really been putting out color for quite some time, so definitely a great plant if you are interested in a long bloom time. This is scaly blazing star. It is kind of a more rare, unusual Liatris. This is fairly low growing. It only gets a couple feet tall at the most, and it's starting to bloom here. This is a nice different type to kind of mix up some of the more standard blazing star that you've seen so far. Definitely a pretty cool variety. So the last thing we're going to look at, certainly not least, is the cardinal flower. I know this is a big favorite for a lot of people with these absolutely striking red flowers that it has. It's a real attractor for hummingbirds. They just can't get enough of this plant. And who can blame them? It's got the perfect little flower for hummingbirds to enjoy. And this is another plant that likes wet areas. I have it growing next to a little bit more of that obedient plant. So I hope everybody has enjoyed my little overview of some native plants over the last couple months. And until the next one, happy gardening.